Dante Cole stared out the car window as his mother drove through Ridgewood, Ohio. Everything looked too neat, too quiet. The houses had white fences, the sidewalks were spotless, and the only sounds came from birds and the occasional passing car. It felt nothing like Detroit. Vanessa Cole, his mother, glanced at him as they approached their new home. "I know it's different, baby, but this is a good thing." Dante didn't answer. He had heard it before. She had said the same thing when she packed up their life in Detroit and told him they were moving to this small town for a fresh start. He wasn't sure who she was trying to convince, him or herself. Their new house was smaller than their old apartment, a single-story home with a patchy lawn and peeling paint on the porch. His mother, though, smiled like they had just pulled up to a mansion. "This is it," she said softly. "No more stress, no more trouble. Just a normal life." Dante stepped out of the car, stretching his legs. The air smelled different here. Cleaner, maybe. Quieter. He didn't know if that was a good thing or not. The next morning he stood in front of Ridgewood High School, his backpack slung over one shoulder. The building was large but old, the kind of school where generations of families had walked the same halls. A row of pickup trucks filled the parking lot, and students moved in clusters, laughing, talking. As Dante walked through the doors, the noise seemed to quiet slightly. It wasn't obvious, but he noticed it. Eyes flickered in his direction. Some were curious, some cautious. Others had that look he recognized, the kind that said, "You don't belong here." He ignored it and kept walking. At the front office, a middle-aged woman with thin lips and glasses barely looked up when he approached the counter. "You must be Dante Cole," she said, handing him a schedule and a locker number. "Welcome to Ridgewood." Her voice was polite, but there was no warmth. Dante nodded, took the papers, and left. As he walked down the hallway, finding his locker, he noticed the whispers. "Who's that?" "New kid. From Detroit, I think. Probably a troublemaker." He had heard it all before. People thought they knew everything about him just because of where he came from. He reached his locker, twisting the combination lock when he noticed someone standing beside him. He turned slightly and found himself looking at a tall, blonde-haired kid with a confident smirk. 3 others stood behind him, all watching Dante like he was some kind of science experiment. "Hey, new guy," the blonde one said. Dante looked at him but didn't say anything. The blonde kid grinned wider. "I'm Tyler Grayson. This is Cody, Brandon, and Jake." Dante's eyes moved over them quickly. Cody had red hair and a face full of freckles. Brandon was the biggest, built like a linebacker. Jake was the quietest, standing slightly behind the others. "You're from Detroit, right?" Tyler continued. "That's a long way from here. Bet this place feels pretty different." Dante shut his locker, keeping his face unreadable. "Yeah, it is." Cody snickered. "Bet it's a lot safer, too. No gangs, no drive-bys, none of that city stuff." Dante's fingers twitched, but he didn't react. He knew what they were doing, testing him, seeing if he'd snap. He wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. Tyler clapped him on the shoulder. "Well, welcome to Ridgewood, man. Hope you like it here." There was something in his tone, something that made it clear this wasn't a real welcome, more like a warning. Dante said nothing as they walked away. He had only been here for a few hours, but he already knew how this was going to go. By lunchtime, Dante had figured out the unspoken rules of Ridgewood High. Tyler and his friends ruled the cafeteria, their table in the center of the room, surrounded by other athletes and cheerleaders. Dante wasn't stupid enough to try and sit there. He found an empty table near the back and sat down, eating in silence. A few seats away, he noticed a girl watching him. She was black, maybe the only other black student in the school. Long braids, deep brown skin, sitting at a table with a group of white girls. She looked like she wanted to say something, but turned away before he could catch her gaze. He focused on his food until a shadow fell over his table. Tyler and Cody stood there, trays in hand. "Man, you don't gotta sit alone," Tyler said, grinning. "Come sit with us." Dante knew this wasn't a real invitation. They didn't want him at their table. They just wanted to see if they could control him. "I'm good here," Dante said, taking a bite of his sandwich. Cody smirked. "Come on, man. Don't be shy." Tyler leaned on the table. "You scared?" "We don't bite." Dante looked up, meeting his eyes. Tyler expected him to react, to get angry, to push back. But Dante wasn't stupid. He knew how to read people, and he knew when someone wanted a reaction. He took another bite of his sandwich and looked away. Tyler's grin faltered for half a second before he laughed and slapped the table. "All right, man. Have it your way." They walked off, but Dante knew this wasn't over. After school, he took the long way home, his earbuds in, music drowning out his thoughts. He had seen how these things played out before. If he reacted too soon, if he gave them what they wanted, it would only make things worse. His uncle's voice echoed in his mind. Control the fight before it even starts. As he passed a gas station, he noticed a group of boys standing by their trucks. Tyler, Cody, Brandon, and Jake. They weren't saying anything, just watching him. They didn't approach. Not yet. Dante kept walking, his muscles tight with anticipation. He hadn't been in Ridgewood long, but one thing was already clear. This was just the beginning. Dante kept walking, keeping his head forward and his pace steady. The weight of their stares followed him down the street, but he refused to turn around. He had been through this before. First came the stares, then the whispers, and then the real trouble. At home, his mother was in the kitchen, humming softly as she unpacked groceries. She smiled when she saw him. "How was your first day?" "Fine," Dante said, setting his backpack down. She raised an eyebrow. "That's all I get?" He opened the fridge, grabbing a bottle of water. "People stared. Some kids tried to test me. That's about it." Her smile faded slightly. "Dante, I didn't do anything." She studied him for a moment before nodding. "Good. Just focus on school, okay? This is a new start for both of us." Dante took a sip of water and nodded. His mother always hoped for the best, but he had learned a long time ago that hoping didn't change reality. The next morning when he walked into school, it was the same as before. Stares, whispers, side conversations. But now there was something else. A quiet kind of tension, like people were waiting for something to happen. By the time he got to his locker, he understood why. The word thug was scrawled across the metal in thick black marker. Dante stared at it for a moment, his jaw tightening. He knew exactly who had done it. He took a slow breath, then opened the locker like nothing was there. If they wanted a reaction, they weren't going to get one. A few kids laughed as they walked by. Others just glanced at him and kept moving. Tyler and his crew were at the other end of the hallway, leaning against the lockers, watching. Tyler had that same smug grin, waiting to see what Dante would do. Dante grabbed his books and shut the locker without a word. At lunch, he took his usual seat at the empty table in the back. His food barely touched. He just sat there, his mind running through possibilities. He could confront them, but that would just give them the attention they wanted. He could go to a teacher, but that wasn't his style. He knew the rules. Complaining wouldn't stop anything. A tray slid onto the table across from him. Dante looked up and saw the girl from yesterday. "Tasha, right?" he asked. She nodded. "You saw me staring, huh?" "Yeah." She leaned back in her chair. "So, you gonna do something about that locker?" Dante took a bite of his food. "Not right now." Tasha studied him, then shook her head. "I've been here since middle school. Trust me, if you let them push, they'll keep pushing." Dante already knew that, but he wasn't going to explain his strategy to her. She sighed and picked at her food. "Well, if you ever get tired of sitting alone, you know where to find me?" She got up and walked back to her usual table. Dante appreciated the gesture, but he wasn't looking for allies. He just wanted to get through the day. But the bullies had other plans. That afternoon in gym class, Coach Reynolds announced wrestling drills. Dante was tying his shoes when Tyler and his crew walked up. "Hope you're ready, Detroit," Tyler said, cracking his knuckles. "We do things a little different here." Dante kept lacing his shoes, ignoring him. Coach Reynolds called for partners, and before Dante could react, Tyler was already in front of him, grinning. "Looks like we're up," he said. Dante sighed. He hadn't planned on showing anyone what he could do, but if Tyler wanted this, then so be it. The coach blew the whistle. Tyler lunged, expecting an easy takedown. Dante sidestepped, shifting his weight, and in one smooth motion, he grabbed Tyler's wrist, twisted, and slammed him to the mat. The gym went silent. Tyler gasped, his face red with humiliation. He struggled against Dante's grip, but it was no use. Dante could have ended it right there. Instead, he let go and stepped back. Tyler scrambled to his feet, trying to play it off. "Lucky move," he muttered. Dante didn't say a word. He didn't need to. As he walked back to the locker room, he could feel the eyes on him. Tyler had just lost, and Dante knew exactly what that meant. This wasn't over. It was just getting started. Dante knew the moment he left the gym that he had made things worse. He had not wanted to embarrass Tyler in front of everyone, but that was exactly what had happened, and a guy like Tyler Grayson would not let that slide. As he walked down the hallway toward his next class, he could feel the shift. The stares were different now. Before, people had looked at him like an outsider. Now they were looking at him with something else. Curiosity, maybe even a little respect. But not everyone. Tyler and his crew were at the end of the hallway, standing by their lockers. Cody said something, and the group laughed, but Tyler was not smiling. His eyes were locked onto Dante, cold and calculating. Dante did not stop walking. He did not give them a second glance. He slid into his next class just before the bell rang. The moment he sat down, he heard whispers behind him. "That was crazy, man. Tyler got wrecked. Who knew the new kid could fight?" Dante ignored it and focused on his work, but the energy in the room had shifted. He had been trying to keep his head down, but now there was no avoiding it. At lunch, as soon as he stepped into the cafeteria, the noise dropped for a split second before picking back up. He could feel the eyes on him, the way some kids whispered and pointed. Tasha was already at her usual table when he passed by. She raised an eyebrow. "Guess you couldn't stay invisible forever." Dante sighed. "Not my choice." She smirked. "Yeah, well, you just made Tyler public enemy number one." "I figured." He sat down at his usual table and started eating, but the uneasy feeling in his gut did not go away. He was right to be wary. After school, he was heading toward the parking lot when he heard a voice behind him. "Yo, Cole!" Dante turned just as Cody and Brandon stepped in front of him. Tyler stood a few feet back, arms crossed, watching. Cody grinned. "You got lucky in gym, man." Dante exhaled through his nose, already tired of this. "I don't believe in luck." Brandon cracked his knuckles. "Yeah? Let's see if you still feel that way when it's not on a wrestling mat." Dante's eyes flicked to Tyler. He was not stepping in, just watching, like he was testing the waters. Dante adjusted his backpack. "I'm not fighting you," Cody scoffed. "Scared?" Dante's jaw clenched, but he kept his voice even. "Number just not stupid." He stepped around them and kept walking. He could hear Cody muttering something behind him, but they did not follow. Not this time. But Dante knew what this meant. This was not over. It was only a matter of time before they tried again. And next time, they would not be looking for words. Dante walked away, keeping his steps steady, refusing to look back. He knew better than to show any reaction. If there was one thing he had learned from his uncle, it was that a fight started long before the first punch was thrown. It started in the mind. And right now, Tyler and his crew were trying to get in his head. They wanted him to react. They wanted him to lose control. But Dante wasn't going to play their game. Even so, as he walked home, he could feel it in his bones. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The next day at school, the tension was thicker than before. Dante could see the way kids looked at him, some with curiosity, some with quiet approval, and others, mostly the ones who stuck close to Tyler, with something closer to anger. Tyler wasn't laughing and joking like he usually did. He was quiet, watchful, planning. At lunch, Dante sat at his usual spot, but this time Tasha joined him without asking. "So you know they're going to try something, right?" she said, stirring her drink with a straw. Dante didn't look up. "Yeah," Tasha sighed. "And you're just going to wait for it." He met her eyes. "What do you want me to do? Go after them first?" She tilted her head. "Number. But I've seen this before. Guys like Tyler don't let things go. They're going to pick the time and place, and they're going to make sure it's in their favor." Dante knew she was right. That afternoon, as he was packing up his things at his locker, he noticed Tyler and his friends huddled together by the gym entrance. They weren't being loud, weren't making a show of it like before. They were talking low, heads close. Dante could tell from the way they glanced at him that he was the subject of that conversation. They weren't going to try anything in school, not with teachers around. No, they were waiting for the right moment. As the final bell rang and students flooded the hallways, Dante slung his backpack over his shoulder and walked toward the exit. He could feel the eyes on him, not just from Tyler and his crew, but from others too. People who had heard about the gym class incident, people who were waiting to see what would happen next. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the pavement. Most students headed for their cars or the bus loop, but Dante always walked home. And Tyler knew that. Dante hadn't taken more than a few steps off school property when he caught something in his peripheral vision. Movement. Tyler, Cody, Brandon, and Jake were about 100 feet behind him, walking at an angle that would intercept his path. Dante exhaled slowly, keeping his pace steady. His heart wasn't racing, his hands weren't shaking. He had been waiting for this, and if they thought he was an easy target, they were about to learn the hard way just how wrong they were. Dante kept walking, his senses on high alert. He could hear their footsteps behind him, steady but deliberate. They weren't rushing him, not yet. The road he took home was quiet, cutting behind a small wooded area before leading into his neighborhood. There were no houses nearby, no cars passing, no one to step in. They had chosen this spot on purpose. Dante stopped. He dropped his backpack onto the pavement and turned around. Tyler, Cody, Brandon, and Jake stood a few yards away. Tyler smirked, but there was no humor in his eyes. "Didn't think you'd stop," he said, rolling his shoulders. "Figured you'd keep walking like a little punk." Dante didn't respond. He just stood there waiting. Cody stepped forward, hands in his pockets. "We gotta talk, man." Brandon chuckled. "Yeah, we don't like the way you embarrassed our boy in front of everybody." Dante's jaw tightened, but his face remained unreadable. "So what now?" Tyler grinned. "You're gonna learn your place." Dante nodded once. "All right." He saw it before it happened. Cody shifting his weight, his right hand pulling from his pocket. A punch aimed straight for Dante's face. Dante moved. He ducked under the swing and stepped to the side, his left hand striking Cody's ribs with the precision of years of training. Cody let out a sharp gasp, stumbling back. Brandon charged next, but Dante was ready. He sidestepped and delivered a sharp elbow to Brandon's gut. The bigger boy grunted, doubling over. Tyler cursed and rushed forward. Dante blocked the punch, countering with a swift jab to Tyler's jaw. The impact sent Tyler staggering. Jake, the quiet one, hesitated. He had seen enough. He turned and ran. Cody clutched his ribs, eyes wide. "What the hell?" Brandon tried to get back up, but Dante stepped forward and sent him back down with a controlled kick to the chest. Tyler wiped blood from his lip, rage replacing his confidence. "You think you're tough?" He swung wildly. Dante ducked, one clean hook to Tyler's ribs, a second to his jaw. Tyler collapsed onto the pavement. Silence. Cody took a step back, hands up. "We're done, man. We're done." Dante didn't move. His breathing was steady, his hands relaxed. Tyler groaned, rolling onto his side, humiliated. Dante picked up his backpack and slung it over his shoulder. "Next time," he said quietly, "pick someone else." Then he turned and walked away, leaving them in the dirt. Dante walked home without looking back. He wasn't afraid of them coming after him again. Not now. They had gotten their answer. The next morning at Ridgewood High, the air felt different. He felt it the moment he stepped through the doors. Conversations hushed when he walked by. Some kids stole glances at him. Others whispered. The story had spread. He passed a group of football players near the lockers. One of them, a tall white boy with shaggy brown hair, nodded at him. "Heard what you did, man." Dante didn't respond. He wasn't looking for respect, just peace. At his locker, Tasha was already waiting. She didn't say anything at first, just leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "So," she finally said, "you put all 4 of them on the ground?" Dante sighed. "Didn't have a choice." Tasha smirked. "Damn, you really are different." He shut his locker. "They gonna leave me alone now?" Tasha glanced down the hall. Tyler and his crew were near the cafeteria. Brandon had a bruise on his cheek. Cody was moving stiffly, like his ribs still hurt. Tyler, though, looked the worst. A split lip, a swollen jaw, and eyes full of quiet rage. But they didn't come near Dante. They didn't even look in his direction. Tasha nodded. "Yeah, they'll leave you alone." Dante exhaled. Finally. As he walked toward his first class, Tasha walked beside him. Guess you don't have to sit alone at lunch anymore. He glanced at her, then gave a small nod. For the first time since coming to Ridgewood, he wasn't just the new kid. He wasn't just the outsider. He was Dante Cole, and that was enough.